All right, good evening. Welcome to the Capital Improvement and Planning Committee for Monday, November 25th, 2024. It is 7:01 p.m. All members are present. We are going to skip outstanding meeting minutes and deal with those next week for as many meetings as we can get caught up on. So we'll go right into department presentations related to both the local and regional schools. So I will bring Keith and Becky over.
Good evening.
Hi, Keith. Hi, Becky.
Hi, good evening.
Do either of you need screen share privileges?
I could do it, Jason.
Okay. So, all right, Keith, you should be all set. So,
Thanks.
we are doing our annual review of all town departments. This will be kind of a two-part item, one for the local schools and one for the regional school. We are not going to be discussing the NERI project tonight, but I realize there will likely be references, especially for certain items that you have in your plan for if-then type statements. So we will have separate presentations on the totality of the NERI project, but this is obviously to capture everything else that needs to be done related to local schools. Then we'll go into the regional schools. So with that, I will turn it to both of you to just kind of walk us through where you, the administration, and the school committees are at.
Great, thank you, Jason. So thank you. I want to appreciate everyone's time tonight, so we can share both the K-8 and the regional capital plans. To date, we have worked closely with the schools and the school principals, as well as our facilities manager, to get to this point. We have also then worked with the subcommittees of both the regional school committee and the Southborough K-8 school committee for the draft that we're going to share before you. Neither of those committees have voted on these plans, as we are continuing to work through different variations and different thinking along the way. But this is the latest. Both committees have seen this in the last week or so. And so this is pretty much fresh off the presses, was the latest thinking of both the committees and the subcommittees' input. One thing you'll notice, Jason, were you able to share both of the documents with the committee earlier?
They have copies of both
Okay.
your capital plans.
All right, great. I will pull both of them up. One thing you'll notice is that they have two different formats, especially for the region. We really dove into that and really wanted to make sure it was telling a story of where we were with capital. A lot of work was done on really rehashing that and getting it to a point where people can pick it up and really understand where we are currently and where we're heading in the next 6 years. But for that, I will start with the K-8. So Jason, I'm going to pull that up now. Becky, before I dive in, is there anything else you would like to add to get started?
No, Keith, I think you've covered everything.
All right, great. You should be able to see the Southborough Public Schools FY26 to FY31 Facilities Capital Plan. This is very similar to prior plans that we have devised. Each of the segments is broken up by each of the schools, and it's broken out into the upcoming fiscal year and goes out 6 years, in this case, out to FY31. The Finn School, Woodward School, and Trottier are highlighted at the top, and the NERI School is at the bottom. And as Jason mentioned, putting all of those items for the NERI School on hold until a decision is made about the building project for that school. So really the focus of this plan is on the other three schools, and kind of as we go, certainly with some of the priorities for the not only for FY26 but FY27 are going to reflect some of the things that are dependent upon the outcome of that project. So when we're looking at the Finn School, one of the things we're laying out for the next couple of years is a continue of the moisture mitigation that we needed to do at the Finn School. We were very fortunate to replace the hallway this past summer, as well as adding a window air conditioning units to the Finn School. That, coupled with a very dry last few months, awarded us a great opportunity to start the school year without any additional issues. However, what you'll still see on this plan is a priority for the next 2 years for the Finn School, and that is to redo the classroom floors in the pre-K wing, which when you're looking at the school is to the far left. So our hope is to do as many rooms as possible over the next couple of years to get that up to speed. It is true that that side of the building is the one that's been most impacted, and that's the one we would like to make those improvements for. As we roll into the Woodward School, we do lay out a 6-year plan here, which really does have some thinking of some major projects, like a roof replacement and also some upgrades to the generator and things like that. But when we're looking at the next couple of years, we're focusing on a couple of things here. One is to improve the technology that is in the classroom. This is something that we're doing in all 3 districts, really looking to get a comparable system in all of our classrooms. So if we go from one building to another and one classroom to another, the student experience, the teacher experience is similar. So really working closely with our IT department to figure out ways of getting that done. And this would be Woodward's portion for the next 2 years, $25,000 each to do that. The second item, and if you do recall from last year, we did have the opportunity to go out for a feasibility study related to air conditioning at the Woodward School. Becky and I have been in a series of meetings in the last few weeks. Our engineer, NV5, has come forward with a draft feasibility report, and we are reviewing those contents. And hopefully, probably within the next couple of weeks, we're going to have more to share on that. And that's why this is a to be determined. So we are in the middle of really digging deep into what the potential options are for air conditioning at the Woodward School, and that's why it still remains a to be determined. And the last couple of items here for the Woodward School are related to the NERI project. If we were to move the Early Childhood Center, which would be pre-K, kindergarten, and first grade to Woodward, we would have to do some upgrades to the school so that we can make sure to take care of our youngest learners. And we are forecasting that to be about approximately $500,000, as well as some additional playground upgrades, which are needed anyways, but would also be conducive to our younger students. So before I go on to Trotter, which does have the bulk of the items, anything pop out about the Finn or Woodward School that you'd like a little more detail on?
Good, Tony.
Thank you. So just a question about the generator replacement. Certainly battery technology has come along incredibly over the last 10 years. It's astonishing how much power you can hang on a wall these days. So have you thought about just a big battery on a wall somewhere?
Not 100%. One of the things that we have explored a lot is the solar capabilities. Battery hasn't quite gotten to the school world yet, but that is something I would imagine that in the next couple of years we would be able to dive into that and see what the potentials are. But the $60,000 is more of a replacement in kind of what we have now. But I do think that we would have some more options available, Tony. Good point.
Thank you.
Joe?
I was wondering, you said you talked about the cost of moving pre-K over into Woodward.
Correct.
I was wondering what the methodology or why we're moving it over to Woodward. Or why would we move over to Woodward as opposed to keeping it over in Finn?
Jason, do you want to take that or do you want me to?
Well, let me ask a clarifying question because then I think will lead to a more descriptive answer for Joe. Is this cost that you're showing here is if the Finn school is decommissioned as a school,
That's correct.
right? And it encompasses pre-K, K, and 1.
That is correct.
Let me ask Joe's question slightly differently, and then we'll answer it. If just grades K and 1 move to Woodward, if the NERI project is successful, does this 500K stay in here?
Our prediction for that is it would be certainly less than that, perhaps even significantly less than that, because the difference of having the pre-K there does make the most significant difference for the Woodward School, but just having K and 1 there would not be as dramatic. So I'd imagine that cost would be reduced.
Well, I was also thinking, we wouldn't be decommissioning it that fast, would we? Or is this a preparation cost for years down the line?
More of a preparation cost for when we'd be moving into the school for, September of 2028.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Okay. Yeah. Thanks.
So this is when we would be funding it, Joe.
Yes. Yeah. No,
not-
I'm thinking the timeline out, and as we're talking about it, I do understand that. Okay.
My personal view, and this is obviously subject to discussion amongst others, is this is a cost that should be part of the NERI budget, right? And there should be language within that specific article, because they're tied together, right? If you do NERI, then this is a cost we know about that you need to do together. You can't then wait for another town meeting. So I think that would be a discussion that we may collapse that into a NERI budget. But then the reason I asked Keith that question is exactly right. I think the town and the schools have a decision to make, even if the NERI project moves forward, is where pre-K should be and what the cost is of that program, especially given that there is some tuition that comes along with that program as well, as you know, for certain students. So to me, this 500 is part of the NERI project, but could be looked at in many different ways depending upon the ultimate grade configuration it's landed on and the reuse of Fin in what happens there. Go ahead, Joe.
Well, actually, adding on to what you just said, I mean, given that the pre-K is really more of a funded project, usually by parents, and the amount of space that's in Fin, would it make sense to maybe leave it there in the first place? I think that building, some physicalities of it lend itself to being more friendly. And given that it is more of a privately funded plan, would that make sense?
I think it's a possibility
I think
based
that's
on all
more-
the discussions we've had.
Yeah, I'm getting far afield on this.
No,
yeah,
I think your line of questioning's actually spot on this, and it's
I agree.
I just think the issue becomes what other groups are interested in Fin, and then creating a safe environment, and then having the administration be able to structure and know that they have different parts of the building available to them than they have currently right now, which is the whole building.
So, Jay, I think you said that very well. Joe, yeah, I think your questions are perfect and right on. I think that is part of the discussion that we're having now, is what makes the most sense. And for a lot of reasons, pre-K at Fin does make sense. But what would be the steps necessary if we were needed to move it to Fin? We want to make sure we're planning ahead for that in the best way possible.
I have a few questions, so I'll just go through a few of these, Keith.
Okay.
On the playground, I think we're going to find we have recreation next week, but I think at both schools, they also have playground in their capital plan, which I realize, your playground upgrades at Woodward are obviously specific to the ages that will be using the building versus Fin is probably just a longer term, it's time. So I think we just need to mirror those two up in who the right party to be carrying that in their capital plan is, and to make sure you all agree on the scope of work, right? Because I realize that's your property during the day, but obviously there is a tremendous amount of town use off hours as well.
Yeah, that's correct. I could see that being a real collaboration, Jason.
Okay. The next is on the floor replacement.
Yep.
If a decision was made in May of 2025 that Finn would no longer be an elementary school, but it was going to be repurposed for some other municipal purposes, would you still recommend going forward with the floor replacement because of the mold that you already outlined?
I would, absolutely. That's why I want to make sure we captured it definitely in the immediate future and then far out. So when we're looking at that building, we're, not 100% confident, but pretty close that the mold issues that we did have did come from surface water that came up from underneath. So one of the things we wanted to do is make sure that we took care of the floors. Where we have done that work at the Trottier School over the years, it's been very successful. So my hope is that if we were to do that at the Finn School like we did in the hallway, it'd be a continuation of that into the classroom spaces. would definitely be a long-term solution for that building. So I would recommend it, Jason.
Okay.
And Jason, I would also say it would benefit whoever the end user was as well, to have that new flooring in there.
Right.
That was exactly the point. Yes. So it's not for the effectiveness of the school operations, it's for the safety of anyone that's in that building.
Correct.
Okay. Final question is on the air conditioning. So you said you have a vendor that's through the feasibility from last year.
Right.
Is it your intention or still to be determined? And I get you have two to be determined on the sheet. Do you think you're going to have an article for this year's town meeting to actually do any physical work? Because I imagine that this is a big number that potentially has 2 commas in it. And obviously, when we look at what's forthcoming on Trotter plus the known, capital related to Neary, and we have other departments with 7-figure numbers as well. We're just trying to figure out the total package. So is that something you're going to come back to us the last minute with, or is that something that may be an FY27 item or too early to comment?
I think I'm pretty comfortable, and Becky, you could chime in. I'm pretty comfortable to say this will not be a FY26 item, especially with the other priorities that we have at Trotter, which we'll get to in a short bit. So yeah, Jason, I could see this no earlier than 27 or 28. And
could you,
unfortunately, it does have 2 commas.
yeah. And is this something that would be eligible for MSBA accelerated repair or no?
Probably not.
Because there's nothing to repair because it's new.
Correct. Because
Okay.
one of the options does have there being a replacement of the univents. But I think because of the age of the building, it's not going to qualify for anything that the accelerated repair program would touch. So it'd probably be a combination of the two things, the addition of the air conditioning as well as the age of the building.
Okay. And sorry, final question on that particular line item. Is your vendor in a position to quantify the federal tax credits that may be eligible with this, similar to my question on Neary last week?
Yeah, no, they seemed decent. I still think having someone that has that level of expertise is going to be important to bring in as a consultant for that work. That's kind of what I'm also hearing from some other districts that are going through it. They did make a few comments. Yes, you qualify. Yes, you qualify. But it didn't seem like they had a real metrics of measuring how much would actually be granted back.
Okay. So I think there's a to-do there on this project as well as the Neary project to link up with Mark and Brian and figure out whether it's a town resource or a school resource and get a third-party vendor to quantify that, because I think it's significant in terms of the money that would come back.
Especially for the Neary project. That's what I'm hearing from similar builds in other communities is they've been able to submit those applications and are also seeing numbers back with 2 commas.
Okay. All right. Unless anyone has anything else on Finn or Woodward, we'll go to Trotter.
Okay, rolling ahead. Right at the top of the list for the Trotter School is the roof replacement. The roof replacement has been on the Trotter capital plan for some time now. Fortunately, in the last 60 days, the MSBA has accepted us into the accelerated repair program for roof replacement. Part of that is that the Trotter roof would be solar ready once the roof was replaced. So that number has been totaled under FY26. And we are currently working not only with the Southborough School Committee, but also the MSBA on the next steps, as we are going to be starting that process within the next couple of months. So that is certainly a large ticket item and is definitely something that we need to be paying attention soon for the immediate future. The next line on this is the technology, similar to Woodward, would be upgrades to the classroom technology here. There are just simply more classrooms at Trotter, so it's divided up over a three-year plan. And then the third item on this list for the upcoming year would be similar to what we did at Finn and also a possibility for Woodward would be air conditioning. This is simply a placeholder. I think we're going to learn a lot from what we're going to be able to do with the Woodward feasibility study, and will likely translate to anything that we consider for a Trotter school. So before I go on, Stephen, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you. So you had mentioned that, excuse me, for the roofing replacement, that it would be solar ready. So is there structural components that are incorporated into that number? Because I just did a quick glance. So it looks like we have flat roof, that's a rubber roof, and then shingle roof, but the solar ready kind of makes me think of there's additional structural components that have to go along with that. Has that been incorporated into that number, and is that a part of that?
It
Five.
has. So one of the things that has been added to the 5.8 million is that it would no longer be a shingled roof. It would be a metal roof, and it would have the ability for panels to be attached. Also, the infrastructure of Trotter has been reviewed by our solar vendor and was given a thumbs up. So coupling that with a metal roof is what they would like to see going forward for solar ready.
Go ahead, Joe.
So are we then looking at another solar cost, or is the solar cost included in the 5.8?
Good question, Joe. So it would be an entirely separate project, and we'd likely enter into a power purchasing agreement. So there'd be no additional upfront capital for that. This is similar to what we've done at Algonquin, also at the Proctor School and Lincoln Street School. So my guess is that we would move forward with a power purchasing agreement.
And the school committee is going to review the metrics on that? Is that where that comes from?
Yes, typically it would come through the school committee. Becky, then we'd have to also, what's the other pathway for that? We've got to get additional approval, correct, Becky, before we enter into it?
I believe that was put at town meeting last year, where
Yeah.
it was approved for us to work with a vendor for solar at Trotter. So I think that's already gone through town meeting approval.
You're right.
And would I be correct in assuming that it has to be a state approved by the education department or of some state agency? Or do we have the freedom to pick any private contractor?
So this actually goes through, we have been working with Select Energy, and they have been procured through a group, a cooperative group that we are a member of, and that's Power Options. And they have followed state procurement law in terms of selecting solar vendors that municipalities can work with. So that's who we have typically been working with on these projects.
Thank you.
While we're
Certainly.
on the roof, Keith, we have feasibility now
Mhm.
that has been, so is this going to be ready for spring town meeting?
It should be, yes.
Okay. And this 5.8 will likely be refined between now and then based on the feasibility. Is that how I understand it?
Yes, that it would have to go through kind of similar to what we did with the Finn boiler many years ago. It does have to go through a pretty rigorous process of feasibility.
So Jason, if I can just speak to that timeline, because I believe, Keith, our invitation date is January 1st. Is that correct?
I believe so, yes.
So from that date, we actually have, it's 90 days to appropriate funds for the schematic design of the roof. What we have found is that maximum, it would be 15,000 for a roof that is less than 5 million. We obviously are just above that 5 million at 5.8. So we're thinking that it will be a little bit more than 15,000, maybe in the $25,000 range for the schematic. And then once that has been approved by MSBA, we would have to appropriate funds for the project within 1 year of that invitation date, which is that January 1st date. So it really depends on this, how quickly the schematic funds can be approved, and then how quickly that the schematic can be completed before we can bring it to town meeting for approval.
All
So
right,
some of the dates are a little off with our
Right.
meeting schedule.
as usual, right? It never
Yes, I know.
never works out.
Our
So,
hope, if everything goes well, it's it's possible.
but item one is no earlier than January 1st. We need to work either within the school budget, the town budget, or through the reserve um, to find a sum in and around 15K to
Mhm.
keep the project moving, because we're not going to have a town meeting unless the select board decides to call one for that amount, which it costs about that amount just to hold one. So is that, do we know that that has made its way forward from Greg to others yet? Or is that, I know this is recent that you got accepted into the MSBA process.
I don't believe it's made its way forward to others. I know we've been looking internally to try to determine what the cost would be and to see what we could do within our own budget first before proceeding.
Okay. So I would suggest that between your team, Greg, and the Southborough School Committee, um, hopefully in the next week or two, you determine if you're going to be able to fund it with available funds. And if not, let's have a broader discussion with Mark, Select Board, and or advisory around sources that the town may have, even if it's a fraction of that. And if not, we need to decide what we're going to do. Assuming that problem gets resolved, it sounds like there's still no guarantee that this is going to appear on the warrant, but we need a placeholder at this point in case it is ready. But you'll have another option uh, later in the year at a fall town meeting if one is held.
That's correct.
But we would not be able to wait till the spring of 2026 to do it.
That
Correct.
A
is
year.
correct.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right. That was a mouthful, but I think important to outline the timing.
No, well done.
Joe?
I know it's going to come up at the meeting when this is proposed as the difference in cost between them. And there'll always be somebody that if it's less will have wanted that as well. So if we're looking at 5.8 for the metal roof with the panels, how much less would it be to do a roof replacement of what we have on there currently?
The estimates that we have for that, Joe, are a little dated. So I would be, it'd be tough to put a number on that. I do recall, oh, Becky, can you remember what they were?
Keith, it's okay. I'm bringing that up now because it's going to come up later.
Yeah,
So
and I think that would be part of the process, going through the feasibility. They would make sure that we're reviewing all options.
good. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Yep, you got it. Okay, any other questions about those top three ones, the roof, technology for the classroom, or the ACs? All right.
Not
So
too.
the last one that makes the priority list for the Trier School for FY26 is the stage curtain and rigging replacement. This is an original item to Trotter that's showing its age. So this was installed in actually 1998. It gets a lot of use, a lot of wear and tear. And through a combination of some of the inspections it's had and just some of the tethering that is occurring with the curtain, we are asking for a full replacement of that, which would bring us to a $55,000 estimate that we currently have in hand. So that's something we'd also have to procure and go out. It's obviously a pretty specialty item. There aren't a lot of vendors that work on stage curtains. So this is something that we would have to do very carefully and thoughtfully through a procurement process, but we are looking at expenditure of about $55,000 to do a full replacement with the rigging.
Questions on those? Okay. Keith, anything else you want to highlight in the out years?
No, nothing other than many of the items that we've seen here. There's not many new ads. and we are just trying to keep up with some of the things that are happening, especially at the Trotter School with the high usage that it does get. So when you're looking out 3, 4, 5 years, you are starting to see some of those things creeping in, and I could see this plan evolving, you know, based on that. So Jason, nothing in particular at this time. Many of those have been ones that have previously already been on the plan. There's nothing, no new ads.
Okay. Before I allow public comment on the Southborough plan, because I see a hand up, is there anything else from the committee on the Southborough plan before we shift to the region? Okay. Kathy, go ahead with your comment. And there you go.
So can we, Keith, whoever's got the screen, can you scroll back up to Finn?
Sure.
So one of the things this may be a little bit outside the scope of what you're trying to do tonight, which I assume is focused on what's going to be brought forth for fiscal year 26. But one of the things we're going to have to do in the NERI discussion is to expand the capital plan for Finn for way out, so that we can show residents what would have to be done to Finn to keep it as a school if it's not going to be closed. The number I have heard, and I believe we heard it the night that the NERI Building Committee voted on to go forth with a 4-year new school, is large, $25 million or so. So I think that at some point someone's got to take this and go much further out so that we can use that in our discussion as far as the NERI project. Now, again, I know you're not talking about NERI tonight, but I just want someone to say that they understand they've got to get that done. I'm surprised the numbers are this small for those 5 years, given what I heard. But Keith, I assumed, so are you saying you've assumed that NERI or Finn is closed when you did this as a school?
No, not necessarily. We were looking at the things that needed the immediate attention that was there, but I think your point's well taken. Anything that would be, you know, 5 to 10 years out, obviously even the scale of this plan doesn't go that far out, or things that we have not completely been investigated. The only thing that certainly is at the top of the list would be a roof replacement that we do predict is going to need to happen within the next 5 years. But outside of that, you know, you're right, there would be a lot of systems that would need some significant upgrades, because that was a renovated school in 1998, not a new school. So
Right.
some of the things that would be necessary, you know, could be included in more of a outwardly facing plan.
Because the number that, so when we get to NERI and talk about the cost of NERI, it's really a net number. It's the cost of a new school versus the cost of keeping the schools the way we have them now, closing NERI, I guess, and then expanding Woodward and expanding Finn. But that's a lot of money too. Okay, so I don't want to say much more because I know that's not the focus tonight. I just want to make sure that fairly soon someone's going to take this and expand it as a school. School's still open for the next, we picked 10, 15 years, so we've got something to compare to.
Kathy, my expectation is that Arrow Street should be making a presentation to the NERI Building Committee on that. And what this represents, you know, similar to the question you asked Keith, is this is really what keep this building running and safe for students. It doesn't necessarily indicate any of the educational type initiatives other than maybe the technology, which I don't even think is on this particular plan. It's on all the other 2 schools.
All right, that's all I want to say about that. And the second thing that I'm gone is the discussion of keeping pre-K at Finn. Is that a new discussion? That's the first time I've heard that tonight.
I think nothing has been decided, so still open.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Joe?
I think Kathy's right about putting that on there, and also the cost of what it'll take to do all the renovations to change it into a community center as well. So we need to get costs on both those plans if we're going to go after it. To address Kathy's comment, I was just asking the question if it had been considered of keeping it there. Not that we know that capital does not originate or make those decisions.
Okay. Keith, let's go to the region.
Got it. All right, did it refresh? Can you see blue and green?
We can.
All right, great. All right, so one of the things we wanted to capture here is sharing some of the approved projects that we already have in the queue, and you can see a little update status on that. This has been very much appreciated to have. We've made some moves on our top priorities for Algonquin for the future investment of it, and we are making some very good progress on that. And I do predict that by the springtime, all of these will be completed satisfactorily. So pretty happy about that. Once we get kind of into the plan itself, I'm going to expand this a little further. There we go. All right. So when we're looking at the projects which are outlined in green, this is kind of what we wanted to make sure we captured here. We're a couple pieces of information. One, that we definitely itemized our top priorities, which are labeled 1 through 6 here, and then we capture them with a total, which would be $630,000 for FY26. And then likewise, going down FY27, 28, and so on and so forth. The other thing that the subcommittee wanted to see is what has been the items that have been deferred, which is versus what items are new to the plan. And then the other piece of information that's here on the way this is organized is showcasing the one-time expenses, meaning it's a one-time fix and we're done, or a multi-year process, which can be the recommendation of many of the projects that populate the bottom half of this. So that's kind of why this is designed now in the way that it is. Hopefully it paints a good picture, not only longitudinally, but also year by year, to make sure we know what we're forecasting for the next 6 years ahead. So I do thank the subcommittee and the school committee for their work on that to make sure we paint a clear picture of what capital needs are needed for Algonquin. So before I dive into individual projects, are there any questions or anything you guys see about the organization of the plan? Does everything make sense, or would you like something explained a little more?
Maybe just a reminder that you probably take for granted, but I'm not sure the committee fully remembers, is we typically don't see these as separate line items in our capital article or in a separate capital article. This is rolled in through the overall regional budget and comes through as an assessment that obviously then gets split based on the Southborough, Northborough split in any given year. But from a capital policy perspective, you still bring it forward to us for a recommendation. So one, these numbers are not the overall impact that Southborough would see. Becky, I'm sure, could keep us honest of what we expect that to be. But two, even if these are recommended to move forward, we will not see them as separate line items in a warrant unless you're seeking bonding of some sort.
Yeah, that is correct, Jason. So Becky has done some work on that assessment on what things would look like. That's something we are prepared to comment on tonight if requested. Before I dive into the projects, is there any questions about the organization of the plan, or does it make sense for the most part? Okay. What you'll see here, and I am going to start with it because we have started with it in the other schools, is the technology piece. This is very similar to what we saw at Trotter and Finn and Woodward. Obviously graduated over only 2 years versus 3, and the number of classrooms is significant. So this number 5 is a very similar item to what we have for the K-8 capital plan. The other items on this plan, in particular, the small performance theater, the sidewalk curbing, the upgrades to the camera system, as well as the roof repair and the parking lot, are all items that have been on previous capital plans. We just have seen them come to the front and can no longer be deferred, and we would like to take care of, some of those as part of this $630,000 assessment. So similar to what we were able to do in blue above, this would be the next kind of stage of that and take care of the next set of priorities. And this was a combination of our work through the facilities department as well as the principal to make sure we were capturing this in the right way to not only take care of the plant, but the campus and the experience for the kids. So it's a combination of all three reflective in this priority list. As you scan that list, is there any particular project you would like a little more detail on?
I'm seeing no hands. Oh, there's Joe. Go ahead, Joe.
When I was looking at the security surveillance, you're doing it in 3 separate years?
Mhm.
Is that addressing 3 separate areas, or is this about phasing a project over multiple years?
Phasing a project over multiple years.
Okay, and why is there 1 year disjointed?
Because there might be enough as the technology has been evolving, what we found is that we might be able to take care of it in a 2-year swing versus 3, but we want to hold on to that just in case.
Interesting. Okay.
We are seeing a lot of movement in that area. We are getting a lot of different feedback on options for it. So we are optimistic that that might be able to be dialed in. We also got a grant last year and we're able to take a chunk of that out. We were able to get an infrastructure grant, federal infrastructure grant last year that front loaded that with about $50,000 worth of equipment. So we are on our way there. That number would be even greater if it weren't for that grant.
And with the seal coat, the parking lot seal coating,
Mhm.
crack resurfacing, what's the lifespan on that kind of repair? I mean, when are we going to have to put in is that going to put off a new parking lot for how long?
It does. So it does probably buy us about 5 to 7 years is what we're forecasting. And at the very bottom of the plan, you'll see I've exposed some of the items, the long-term projects. Parking
Yeah.
lot is on that list. So basically that's a holder until we get to full parking lot replacement at Algonquin, which I would also imagine can be done in phases.
So yeah, so in other words, we're putting this as sort of an item every X number of years as long as we can get away with it. Is that
That's correct.
read that? Okay.
That's correct.
I'm gathering putting a new parking lot will be millions, right? So
It will. That's another 2 comma event. Yes, correct.
like the way you put that.
Yeah.
All right.
From Jason.
Any other questions on this so far?
Okay, great. So as we scroll down a little bit, one of the things we wanted to start to capture, and this is, a brand new section for us. And Joe, it gets to your point of what are we looking at beyond this plan? What are the bigger ticket items that are coming our way? These are things that we're going to try to forecast as best we can. Certainly, roof replacement is on there. Algonquin is 20 years young right now, and we're going to see these things kind of creep up in the next 5 to 10 years. Parking lot reclamation, like we just spoke about, and rooftop unit replacement. We've already had to replace a couple of units at Algonquin, and that getting on a good cycle of rooftop unit replacements is going to be important to have for a longer term plan. So these are the ones we've captured so far, and I would imagine that we're going to get this list to evolve in the next year or so to build it out more. And kind of likewise to the parking lot reseal coating, Becky, you're in a good line right there. We can do 1 or 2 at a time until we have to do something more significant. So that's why you will see in line 30 there, the HVAC replacement, same idea versus doing something a little more elaborate for a longer term project below. That's the thinking behind that. Joe?
Yeah, I know this is sort of just for my personal information. So we just redid the athletic complex over there.
Correct.
When will we start seeing maintenance items on here, or is that going to be covered under some other operational budget?
Yes, we are going to try to get that as much taken care of as possible, whether it be through rental or operational. But we are looking at larger items related to that after about a decade or so. So we are preparing for that in the next couple of years, make sure we're in a good position so that we don't have to have any items related to the athletic complex on the capital plan.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
There any big projects that would be an MSBA accelerated repair? I mean, I know there's a lot of small projects that obviously add up to a decent number, but any large items in the offing, just especially given the size and age of that school, and comparing this list to obviously much smaller schools in Southborough, it just seems disproportionate.
I would think the roof replacement that you're looking at, Keith, for A, B, and C, that would be an MSBA eligible project.
Yeah, I would agree. Perhaps the boilers, Jason, once they pop on, they've been maintained pretty well. We've done a lot of maintenance on those, but the boilers could possibly be something that pops on that yellow list. But Becky, I think you're right. Probably the roof is the one that would be at the top of, to be able to answer that question properly.
And then my final question is, I realize and appreciate the school committee and the administration's prioritization, but I think I've asked this the last couple of years in the region. Are you being aggressive enough on the maintenance and repairs of this building such that we're gonna hopefully avoid some larger ticket items or unforeseen type items? I realize it's a very, very delicate balance, but just want to make sure that nothing here is getting deferred too much over time, or at least if it is being deferred, we're consciously making that decision.
Becky and I think what we can speak to is what we've seen in the last 3 to 5 years, and certainly what we're seeing in the last 12 months is that, you know, the new strategy with making sure that we do get that assessment in place annually, and that seems to be what the committee would like to do, is going to be able to take significant chunks out of this capital plan, and it is rather aggressive. So I think if anything were to pop up, it wouldn't be as much of a surprise. I can't say that it won't happen, but the likelihood is less, especially because we've been able to invest. Hopefully, you know, we just did $391,000 of investment this past year, and then in the upcoming year, 630, if that goes well, would definitely take significant chunks out of this plan. So I think so. The strategy has not been to just defer, Jason, which it was prior, and now we're able to take some of those items off the list, which has been well received.
Okay, thank you, Joe.
Sort of along the thought of what Jason had when he started talking, he triggered it. Along with the parking lot, you know, I mean, this building is getting older and older, and I don't know if we've done any already, but when do we have to repoint the brick exterior or address any sort of structural issues? Are there, or what is the lifespan that we expect it to have from now till we need to do some of that?
We're in pretty good shape. I think Mike Gorman, who's the facilities director over at Algonquin, he has had that evaluated. I haven't seen that in a little bit of time, but we did get a pretty good clean bill of health for the last inspection. But let me reboot that with him, Joe. I haven't heard about that in a couple of years, so I think no news is good news, but I would like to ask him that question more directly.
Thanks.
Welcome. So Jason, I think that completes the items I wanted to share this evening.
Okay, are there any other questions from the committee? All right, next item is FY, well, first of all, thank you, Keith and Becky. We'll let you resume your evenings, and we'll be back in touch with you with any questions.
That'd be great, Jason. Thank you. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
everyone's
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night. Bye, Mark.
All right, next item is update on the FY 26 capital. So we are, I'm working with Brian to get a comprehensive list of what we've heard and what we're going to be asked to vote on and prioritize. So should have that for the next meeting. The DPW superintendent has also started to work through a prioritization and submitted one at least related to the vehicles and attachments. So we have that on the agenda for next week. We also have our final department heads, which are police and recreation, next week as well. So we would have heard from everyone at that point. So we should have a full picture after next week's meeting to start deliberating and asking additional questions or pushing items forward. Okay, is there any public comment? I'm seeing no other. Oh, Patty, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Can I just ask, first of all, one question regarding the roof at Trottier. If the roof at Woodward is $1 million and the roof at Finn is $1 million, what is the rationale for the roof at Trottier to be 5.8 million? I recognize he said that it would be metal and solar ready, but does that justify a 4 times increase?
We will, I'm going to partially answer it, but also say we should have the school administration answer it, and I'll send you an email or address it next week's meeting. But in short, the Trottier roof has seen a lot more diligence on it in terms of cost estimating because they're part of a process versus I think the Finn and Woodward ones have not. There's also far less roof at both Finn and Woodward. They're about half the size in terms of overall square footage. I'm not sure. I'm not an engineer, so I can't say whether that is all of it because you're citing a 4 times difference as opposed to a 2 times difference. But we'll get you an answer. I think it's a good question.
So my other question is, when can we, as the public as a whole, expect a total package on figures for capital improvements that we should be looking at over the next 5 to 10 years in order to make an informed decision regarding the Neary School? I want to preface that by saying, we're hearing about the project for the Trottier roof, that's a lot of money, air conditioning at Woodward. There's issues with playing fields, library addition, the possible renovation of Finn to a community center or senior center, something I've heard numbers from 14+ million to 49 million. There's going to be a new rec center. I assume that means there will have to be changes to our public safety building to accommodate the changes in that, the rec center by going fully remote. We haven't seen capital improvements for DPW or fire or police staffing changes. And the last one that comes immediately to mind, I'm sorry, my voice isn't working well. The last one that comes immediately to mind is the cost of any renovations to the Flag School for repurposing it once the Historical Society leaves. So I really feel that it's important to have a full, complete picture of anything that will affect taxes before we are asked to vote on the incredibly expensive project of this school.
So the CIPC is responsible for maintaining a 10-year capital plan per town code. What we are doing now, right? And we've already met with facilities. We've met with the schools tonight. We met with fire, and we have police and recreation, and we had DPW last week. So once we hear from once we hear from recreation and police next week, we would have heard from each department on their 10-year capital plans, albeit the schools only go through 8. But I think you can get the big picture from what they presented tonight. We will have an updated spreadsheet that shows the desires of each department. Does not mean that capital recommends moving forward with all of those. We obviously make recommendations in the year, but we maintain and keep items on a capital plan so that we can answer your exact question. So I expect after next week's meeting, I believe the select board wants to hear from us middle of December. So I would expect that would also be part of it too. But I would just caution you that just because it's on a capital plan does not mean that capital supports it going forward. And I think voters will be asked to make decisions, in a variety of years based on the facts they have in front of them.
I thank you. I can appreciate that. And perhaps this is out of your purview, but along with advising not to fund specific capital projects, do you also advise where to potentially trim or additional expenses not to be undertaken to offset the increase for the capital expenses that will be undertaken?
Are you talking about like operating expenses?
Any, any
Yeah.
expenses?
I mean, if you look at I guess I'll answer the question by, over the years, we certainly have trimmed capital expenses from what was originally asked. We've asked departments to think about how they would operationalize it, and even if it was a low capital cost, but high operational expense, even though we have no purview over the operational budget, we have made recommendations and changed line of thinking around that. And we do look at the cost to maintain and the cost of what it's replacing as well. So there've been some things that some departments, I'm not going to call them out, have brought forward that we have completely shifted where those direction have gone. But I'm not comfortable citing each individual one because I would probably misstate a few on the fly.
Okay, thank you.
Right. So any other public comment? Okay. Is there any other business that anyone wants to conduct? I wanted to just take the opportunity to thank Jeff Hark for his contributions. He submitted his resignation due to conflicts with our meeting schedule and available time to commit to the committee at this point. Earlier this week, I believe, or late last week. For those who don't know, Jeff was one of the quote unquote founding members of the Reinvigorated Capital Planning Committee at that time, and obviously has been a tremendous asset to the committee over the years with a lot of insight. So wish Jeff nothing but the best, and obviously thanks for his many years of contributions to the committee. And we'll selfishly put out the call for anyone that's interested in these matters. We do have an open seat that we are looking to fill. Okay, with that, I'm going to make a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All right, roll call vote. Joe,
Aye.
Tony,
Aye.
Steve,
Aye.
and I am I as well. Have a good evening.